This is a new series that I'm starting right now called How to Not Lose in Chess. I'll be looking at games where players lost in chess, and we'll look at their mistakes and where they went wrong, which cost them to lose. Of course, it's impossible to never lose a chess game, but hopefully by looking at these practical reasons that players lost, you'll be able to learn not to do those mistakes. So let's get right into it. The game began with the move d4, and now e6, c4, knight to f6, knight to c3, and bishop to b4, the Nimzo-Indian defense by black. And here you already have a couple of options as white. One thing to notice is that black has prioritized kingside development and castling quickly, and you have the chance to do the same. You can play the move e3, which is what was played, and look to develop these kingside pieces and castle quickly as well. But by doing so, you lock this bishop in, and so an alternative way to play here is to look to develop the bishop first, maybe to f4, maybe to g5, and get this bishop to a more active square, and then go ahead and try to develop these pieces. Maybe the bishop onto d3 would be nicer, and castle. And you are going to castle a bit later, but of course all of your pieces would then have a good square. So that is kind of the options here, and white went for e3 and prioritized castling quickly, which could be a strong choice, especially considering the fact that black is going to castle and therefore not really worry about opening up the center, and if your king stays in the center for too long, once the center opens up, that could mean pretty unfortunate attacking chances on you. So the move knight to f3, and now c5, bishop to d3, and now the move d5 and a3, kicking away this bishop. If you're looking at this in black's perspective, this bishop is one of your most active pieces. It's, just visually the most up the board, and it's one of the first pieces that you developed. And so as white, you kind of want to get this bishop out. It poses a nice pin here, and it's on a nice diagonal. And as long as the king is in the center, again, there's that pin here where your knight is not really defending in the center. So the bishop takes the knight, and now you take with the pawn, of course. And although you kind of wreck your structure, it's no longer connected, there's so many positives that the positives truly outweigh the negatives. You have a massive amount of pawn mass in the center, which could lead you to be able to storm in the center with your pawns. And of course, this B file is open as well, and it's pretty well known that one pawn can hold off two pawns quite well if you position it nicely. So if they play a6 at some point and you get your pawn to a5, then you're kind of holding back both of these pawns. So having this 2-on-1 here on the A and B file is probably not going to be too bad for you. Okay, so you take with the pawn, and now the move b6 was played. You castle, and knight to c6. So black has a pretty good setup here. Their pawns are pretty nicely in this pyramid shape, and they have easy development, especially with this pawn on b6. It's supporting the center, and it's allowing this bishop to develop, and of course the bishop can't really develop here. And you need to also look at developing, and this is kind of where building a plan comes into play. This bishop, it can't really get out on this diagonal. It's going to be very hard to push e4 in the current way that the position is in, with this pawn being here. And you're going to want to essentially open up the position. So first white took here, and then played the move a4, which is a move that I like. Again, the idea is to give this bishop a place to develop, because it can't really develop actively onto this diagonal. And you need to find these ways to develop the bishop actively. Some might say, well, can't you fianchetto it? You can, but look at the current state of the position. And it is true that positions can change, but especially with black always being able to push this c4 pawn. In fact, maybe the immediate c4 is good. This bishop is just going to be locked, and there's no great chances to open it up. Because again, e4 is a pretty hard move to pull off, because black is going to be able to add a lot of pieces defending from that push. Which is why, it is nicer if your bishop was on this diagonal, which is why I like the move a4. An alternative way to try to develop this bishop was to open up this diagonal, and you can't really go for e4 right now, and the main reason for that is because of this pawn, but maybe you can try a move like c4, distracting this pawn and then going for the move e4, in which case your bishop will be set free. Or, if after here they don't take and instead take the pawn in the center, c takes on d4, well, then you can take with the knight, and after takes, again, after takes, the bishop is freed. And so that would have been one way to open up this diagonal by removing this pawn here, but I like this move a4 a lot again. Okay, so c4, you drop the bishop back, bishop to g4. I think here already the move bishop a3 is quite nice. It also comes with tempo, but there's no reason that h3 is bad. This is a completely fine move. Bishop to h5, rook to e1. Again, I think you could just stop delaying this development, because while you're delaying it, notice that these pieces, these major pieces on this first rank can't really connect, and typically that's one of the big achievements you want to do in the opening. So it is important to develop your bishop quickly. So I would say that, looking at this logically, you want to connect your big pieces. So bishop a3 is probably a little bit better than rook to e1, but both are completely fine. Now the move rook to e8 was played, and here you made, I think, what is your big mistake that cost you to lose this game with the move a5. I think here you have to play the move bishop a3, and again, it comes with the same advantages that I previously talked about with these pieces being connected, and also, again, the bishop is on a beautiful diagonal, both of them are, and you're doing completely fine here. But by playing a5, you're sacrificing a pawn, and I don't really see what you're getting for it. If they take with the pawn, then now you maybe do have compensation. First of all, this bishop can come here and immediately apply this pin, which could be annoying. And these pawns are broken up, so even though there's two pawns here on the queen side, it's hard to really do anything with them. And this b file, you can equally use it as much as black, and you can use that to your advantage, especially if you manage to get rooks onto b7, and you manage to get rooks onto the 7th rank. That could be very good for you. So there is compensation in this line, but they can simply take with the knight, and now I don't really see what you're getting. You continue, you follow this up with bishop a4 and then bishop a3. And maybe you were thinking that you're trapping this rook, but unfortunately it has extra squares. And so you have to be very careful when you're giving away material. For example, a pawn here, you need to have clear compensation. And that could sometimes be a specific line. For example, if this rook couldn't go here, then maybe you had this specific line where you're going to be able to trap the rook. But unless you have a specific line or some positional advantage, kind of like if they take with this, you have this positional advantage where they have these doubled pawns and your bishop can come here, and maybe this b file. So unless you have a clear positional advantage or a clear tactical line to get some compensation, you should not sacrifice material. And so here, after they eventually move the rook to e6, you don't really have any continuation. The idea of g4 and then trying to trap the rook does not really work, because even though the rook is trapped, it's not that big of a deal. They can maybe play knight e4 and end up using this f file for their advantage and attacking along here. And then also, if you try to defend from this queen coming, you lose this pawn, so this knight is also doing an immediate attack, so it looks pretty bad for you. And then even, not even going into this, they can just sack here for sure, and, they have this pin here, and especially with the rook being on e6, this sacrifice is very good for them. They can easily attack this king, and you're completely busted here. And notice that your bishops, although they are on quite nice and long and empty diagonals, they're doing nothing to help the defense of the king, and you would much rather them actually on the king side offering some defensive support. So that's why this sacrifice was losing. You don't really have much compensation. And in the game, that's exactly what happened. Here you had to resort to playing bishop e4, which is the best move, or one of the best moves, I think, in this position. But, you're still just losing here. Now they can infiltrate knight e4 is a decent move, putting the knight in a central square and looking to maybe attack this c3 pawn. And you can't really defend it easily. If you defend it with the queen, then of course they can break up your structure. If you instead defend it with like the rook, then all of your pieces are tied down, and they're going to be able to infiltrate quite quickly. So maybe queen to c8, because if they go rook to g6 immediately with this idea, then it's a little bit slow. Maybe you can take and distract this rook. But if they start with queen to c8, then they're lining this up, so they're threatening to do this and in one move threaten to attack. So if you play a random move, for example, maybe then this is quite strong, because even if you take, perhaps they could even ignore the threat and just counterattack you quite heavily. I'm not sure if this works, but it looks pretty interesting. But even if they just take the bishop, I mean, their pieces are completely dominating you, and your pieces are just really passive. So you go for this queen c2 move, but then you break up your pawn structure, the queen can infiltrate, and from here it's already basically game over. There's nothing you can do, and they're threatening the simple checkmate, with the queen being a nice cutoff for your king, and I don't really see a way to hold off on this checkmate. You play the move f3, and that allows the checkmate, but honestly, I don't really think there's much you can do here. They're going to be able to checkmate you in just a couple of moves. Hopefully you learned from this game, and if you did, then give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more. And if you want your game analyzed, then leave it down below in the comment section or email it to me, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.